This is Bitnar Talks, the engineer takes on construction. Episode 25. Hi, I'm Piotr Bitnar. Each day I help my clients plan and design building projects through Bitnar Limited, a consulting chartered structural engineer's practice. My biggest passion and the cornerstone on which I've built my business is finding clever solutions for construction projects. I am a chartered structural engineer and a budding software developer, so you can rest assured that I will strive to talk about the best practices and the use of new technologies in the industry. And if you're embarking on a construction project or are involved in planning, designing and building the world around us, you'll find this podcast useful. Approved Document J, Combustion Appliances and Fuel Storage Systems. Hi, and welcome back to Bitnar Talks, your favorite podcast on all matters of architecture, engineering and construction. It is Thursday, the 1st of August 2024, and I'm here back with you with the 25th episode and information on Approved Document J, Combustion Appliances and Fuel Storage Systems. We are at the eve of summer holidays. Believe it or not, these episodes are not curated by an army of employees powered by AI, so the host, meaning I, needed a little break. I now return back to you from the scorching coast of Italy, back to the southeast of England, country where we can afford outside air conditioning. Oh, sorry, it's just the weather that is not as nice as our flour, tomato sauce and cheese-loving friends is. As ever, before I go to covering the material of this episode, let's have a look at what was covered last week. In the last episode, I talked about the Approved Document H, drainage and waste disposal. There are 6 requirements covered in this document, and these are Requirement H1, foul water drainage, which concentrates on proper capacity, minimization of blockages and leaks, access for maintenance and prevention of foul air ingress or backflow into the property. Requirement H2, wastewater treatment systems and cesspools, tells us that systems must avoid nuisances, health hazards and pollution with adequate ventilation and access for maintenance, as well as to adhere to environmental agency guidelines and BS standards. Requirement H3, rainwater drainage, tells us that systems should effectively carry water from roofs and paved areas, prioritizing soakways to be used first before anything else, then watercourses with discharge to sewers as the last resort. We need to think correct sizing to the tributary area and the local rainfall, and we need to ensure to provide accessible maintenance points to our system. Requirement H4, building over sewers, treats on new buildings so they do not affect existing drainage, obstruct maintenance or replacement or replace the access for the maintenance. Also, the drainage does not compromise the stability of the structures. We are reminded in that section that agreement with the drainage system owner is required. Requirement H5, separate systems of drainage, goes on to tell us that separate systems for surface and foul water are necessary, ideally directing surface water to soakways or watercourses, but should a combination be required, that needs to be cited properly and agreed with local authority. Requirement H6, solid waste storage, is all about the provision of adequate, accessible and vermin-proof waste storage facilities to prevent health hazards and maintain hygiene, ensuring ventilation and weather resistance. In this episode, I will move to the Approved Document J, Combustion Appliances and Fuel Storage Systems. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this. In this episode, I'll talk about the statutory guidance contained within the Approved Document J, combustion appliances, and fuel storage systems. The episode will follow its standard format for the material talking about the approved documents. I will first read you the text of the actual regulation and then we'll go section by section. The document contains guidance for the discharge of requirement J1 to J7 in 6 sections, 0 to 5, and additional information in appendices. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this approved document. Starting with the text of the legislation, Part J, Combustion Appliances and Fuel Storage Systems. Air Supply. J1. Combustion appliances shall be so installed that there is an adequate supply of air to them for combustion, to prevent overheating and for the efficient working of any flue. Discharge of products of combustion. J2. Combustion appliances shall have adequate provision for the discharge of products of combustion to the outside air. Now, requirement J1 and J2 apply only to fixed combustion appliances, including incinerators. Warning of release of carbon monoxide, that's requirement J3, where a combustion appliance is provided, appropriate provision having regard to the design and location of the appliance shall be made to detect and give early warning of the release of carbon monoxide at levels harmful to persons. Now, requirement J3 applies only to fixed combustion appliances located in dwellings. Protection of building, that's requirement J4. Combustion appliances and flue pipes shall be so installed, and fireplaces and chimneys shall be so constructed and installed as to reduce to a reasonable level the risk of people suffering burns or the building catching fire in consequence of their use. Now, requirement J4 applies only to fixed combustion appliances, including incinerators. Provision of information, that's requirement J5, where a half fireplace, flue or chimney is provided or extended, a durable notice containing information on the performance capabilities of the half fireplace or flue or chimney shall be affixed in a suitable place in the building for the purpose of enabling combustion appliances to be safely installed. Protection of liquid fuel storage system, that's requirement J6. Liquid fuel storage systems and the pipes connecting them to combustion appliances shall be so constructed and separated from buildings and the boundary of the premise as to reduce to a reasonable level the risk of the fuel igniting in the event of fire in adjacent buildings or premises. Now, requirement J6 applies only to fixed oil storage tanks with capacities greater than 90 liters and connected pipes, and B, fixed liquefied petroleum gas storage installations with capacities greater than 150 liters and connecting pipes, which are located outside the building and which serve fixed combustion appliances, including incinerators, in the building. Protection against pollution, that's requirement J7. Oil storage tanks and the pipes connecting them to combustion appliances shall A, be so constructed and protected as to reduce to a reasonable level the risk of the oil escaping and causing pollution, and B, have affixed in a prominent position a durable notice containing information on how to respond to an oil escape so as to reduce to a reasonable level the risk of pollution. Now, requirement J7 applies only to fixed oil storage tanks with capacities of 3,500 liters or less, and connecting pipes, which are A, located outside the building, and B, serve fixed combustion appliances, including incinerators, in a building used wholly or mainly as a private dwelling, but does not apply to buried systems. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, straightforward stuff, isn't it? On this occasion, as in many other requirements, we will find expectations that fall outside of the merit of just providing reasonable protection to the health and safety of people in and about the buildings, but on us in regulation, put on us in the regulation 8. In this case it is part J7, as it deals with protection against pollution. It needs to be noted that the requirement is enforceable on particular types of building work or material change of use, and some building classes may be exempt from the regulations. You can find the list of classes in Schedule 2 of Building Regulations. Having said that, building regulations do not stand alone, and the gas installation will fall under the Gas Safety Installation and Use Regulations 1998. Some further requirements will come from the Workplace Health and Safety Welfare Regulations 1992 or under the Clean Air Act 1993, as amended by the Environmental Act 2021. Schedule 4 of Building Regulation lists the number of works that do not need to be notified to the building control, but the work on combustible appliances, unless it is not a repair or maintenance, will need to be notified to building control. In case of anyone wonders, the standard of the work and use of materials need to be right and proper, as need to be the periodical maintenance and service. Before you start dreaming of owning an open fireplace, do check if you do not live in a smoke control area. In such areas, you may be required not to use an appliance or use an authorized type of fuel or use an exempt appliance. So starting with section 0. It needs to be understood that the approved documents guidance has been prepared mainly with domestic installation in mind and covers combustion installation and its fuel storage systems, including solid fuels, things like space and water heating units and cookers. The installation covered in the guidance are solid fuel installation of up to 45 kilowatts of rated output, gas installation of up to 70 kilonewtons of net or 77.7 kilowatts of gross rated input, and oil installations of up to 45 kilowatts rated heat output. 3,500 liters of oil storage or 1.1 ton of LPG storage. Guidance outside of these parameters can be found in Chartered Institution of Building Services Engineers CIBSE Guide B and materials produced by the British Standard Institution and the Institution of Gas Engineers and Managers. The guidance goes on to address consideration for different appliances used in different ways. So we will go by fuel type, solid, oil or gas, air supply, open fluid, say through the background or provided inlet to the room, or room sealed. Air is supplied directly into the combustion chamber through a flue. In any case, whether open or room sealed system, the burning can be also assisted by fans. Combustion products removal, natural drought flue, fan flue, or flueless. The drought can be further assisted by drought brake or diverted or stabilized. This section goes on to describe all different elements that may form the installation or consideration for the installation of combustion appliances, including fireplace, structural recesses which shape and lining may or may not be suitable for all different types of combustion fuels. I really like this document as it's full of descriptions and diagrams, making it very easy to follow. Like the diagram 6, showing a cross-section through the floor containing half, or diagram 7 that makes show you really know that taking the dimension diagonally through flue is not the correct way of doing it. Now, section 1 starts with telling us that Secretary of State is happy if the installation is good and proper in specification, material, size, workmanship, and inspection for its safe and good operation, and the carbon monoxide alarm is provided for solid and gas appliances, excluding cookers and oil appliances, and provided that any fuel storage of oil or gas is proper and the performance capability of the system is labeled. So air supply and flow will depend on the type of the appliance it requires, intake, number of appliances, and the requirement for cooling if needed. And it is all nicely shown on diagrams within the documents. The permanent open vents should be well sized, taking in consideration their grills and meshing of not less than 5 mm gaps, and so located that the occupiers cannot seal them, also the draught does not become a nuisance to occupier or does not disturb the remainings of combustion. The locations of air vents will depend on performance or location of the appliance, but care should be taken when there are protective membranes so that their function remains intact. Things like breather and vapor control membranes in timber frame construction or gas barriers from below the ground. The approved document shows typical suggestions for the location of such vents. We may be able to account these openings for a background ventilation for the requirement F, but not the other way around, due to a simple fact of the ventilation requiring to be constantly open. Purge ventilation will also be necessary in such instances. We also need to assure that if the rooms are mechanically ventilated, there is not enough of depressurization, that's the tough one, in the room as to background the combustion products. So we don't want to have that reverse suction action on our flue, so we get suffocated with the combustion gases. The guidance gives us limits for fan extraction maximums in rooms with different appliances. So for gas appliances it is 20 liters per second. For oil it is either 40 or 20 liters per second for pressure jet burner or vaporizing burner. And for solid fuel burners the limit is 0, unless it can be proven the installation can be safe in operation. Similarly, for commercial installations there may be some extra considerations necessary to make sure proper air and products of combustion circulation. Extra care is also advised where ground gases are ventilated away from underneath the building so they do not recirculate back into the house. The guidance directs us to now withdrawn building research establishment Good Building Guide 25 that deals with radon and shows us the particulars of this sort of circumstances. The check to assure no bad draughts or harmful gas spillage is needed and will entail running the walls depressurization. Well, that's a tough one. My tongue isn't capable of doing this one properly. Of the room scenario using all fans and different arrangement of open to closed windows and doors. The spillage test may come from proprietary literature or British standards or other publications like that produced by Oil Firing Technical Association. Unless the system is flueless, we will need to provide a flue or a chimney, separate for each solid burning appliance, but can be combined for other fuels. However, the guidance only covers single flue or chimney system and references BS 5410 and BS 5440 for oil and gas installations. The chimney should not be prone to condensation, so for non-condensing appliances it's best if the flues are insulated to avoid such in normal operation, or to be in line with the material appropriate to resist corrosion and such to allow drainage of the condensate. Masonry chimney should be sufficiently strong, thick and of sufficiently dense material with flues lined with a liner at least as good as designation T400 and to D3G to BSEN 1443 standard. That can also be clay flue or concrete liners. There is no one good answer here. Use what you want and what is compatible with your system and meets the standards. Typically, you will be using proprietary products, so follow the instructions. Naturally, just to mention the obvious, the elements should be joined up correctly using grout of high temperature resistance, otherwise called fire or refractory cement, and the space between the flue lining and the masonry should be filled with a lightly wetted, lean mix of cement, 1 part of either 20 parts of lightweight expanded clay aggregate or 6 parts of vermiculite or 10 parts of perlite, just for the installation purposes. An alternative to using liners is to use a proprietary flue block system of sufficient designation and durability installed to the manufacturer's specification. Adapting existing chimneys or flues should be done with due consideration to its current state and condition of repair, connection type and material, and insulation from other elements of the building. Flues are controlled services, and the introduction of a new flue liner or replacement of such will require notification to building control. Metal liners should be replaced together with the appliance, and the flexible liner cannot be used as a primary liner. You can use plastic flue pipes to BSEN 14471, appropriate for the appliance type and fuel. When it comes to factory-made metal chimneys, these need to follow standards applicable to the type of the fuel used. Perforation of walls and floors, plates, as well as heat-related consideration for the detailing of the installation should be considered, such as distance away from the flue as described in BSEN 1856. The joints of these flues need to be serviceable. Any concealed flues should be accessible for inspection with access hatches of at least 300 mm squared, not further than 1.5 meter away from the joint or a band. Natural drought flues serving open flue appliances should be ideally vertical with no bends, discounting the outlet from the appliance, which should be no further than 150 millimeters from the appliance. Max 4 bends of maximum 45 degrees are allowed, where 90-degree angle proprietary appliance outlet accounts for 2 of these. Access for inspection and sweeping should be provided every 2 bends. We are reminded that low-level outlets may be disrupted in future due to neighborly extensions, but dread not, as the guidance comes with a diagram for appropriate location. How would it do it otherwise, right? Those documents are brilliant. We are also informed to avoid creating voids near the combustion appliances to which gases could escape. Things like decorative dry linings around, which should have such gaps well sealed. The responsibility to discharge requirement J lays with the person executing the works. Reports stating the elements of the installations are suggested in Appendix A of the document, and tests to the guidance of Appendix E should be collated and ready for submission to building control. The installation should be free from obstruction, gas tight, of proper materials and workmanship, spillage tested during commissioning for Part L compliance. Hearths should be of the right size and material. The information about hearths, fireplaces, flues and chimneys need to be permanently posted in the building to avoid misuse. So information on their location, size, category, make, suitability and installation date. Example of notice is provided within the document. Position of such plate should be such it is readily accessible. So places like a consumer unit next to stopcock or next to the actual chimney will do just fine. Roof space installed gas-fired appliances should follow now withdrawn BS 6798 specification for installation and maintenance of gas-fired boilers of rated input not exceeding 70 kilowatts net. Now we will move to section 2, which extends on the information provided in section 1, concentrating on appliances burning solid fuel, including biofuel, with a rated output up to 50 kilowatts. Air supply to these beasts need to follow the minimum consideration, but may require more depending on the type of appliance and the type of fuel used. Checking the manufacturer specifications or the table in the approved document would be the point at which we should start the consideration. For example, an open fireplace under a canopy or with a throat requires a fresh air supply of at least half of the exhaust capacity, meaning half of the flue in the case of the canopy or throat. It will not be of surprise, but the flue also needs to be of appropriate size and run starting at the size of the appliance outlet, or it can be looked up in the documents tables. So for example, for fireplaces, we start at 200mm diameter size or equivalent, and for closed appliances we start that smaller, from 125mm diameter flue. Large opening fireplaces should have a flue of at least 15% of the total face area. However, should the size be larger than 0.12 meters squared or exceed the 15% limit, we are encouraged to seek specialist advice. We are guided in the subject of flue height that should be high enough to develop sufficient draught. The figure will depend on the type of appliance, number of bends and local wind patterns, but we start at 4.5 meters high. We can calculate the actual requirement using a procedure within BSEN 13384, a standard that deals with thermal and fluid dynamic calculation methods for chimneys. The height is measured either from the appliance outlet or the point where exhaust cases enter the chimney. The flue outlet position should also be considered. We cannot just plonk it anywhere on the roof. It needs to be positioned so the exhaust gases can freely disperse in the air. The document comes to help with a handy diagram, but the gist is simple. There are three distances to consider: 600 millimeters, 1000 millimeters, and 2.3 meters. 2.3 meter is a horizontal distance to any other roof feature, protrusion, other parts of buildings, other buildings, or windows. In most cases, the outlet should be at least 1 meter in height, but will likely need to be either as high as the ridge, 600 millimeters higher than the ridge, or the adjacent feature if close to the ridge, or the feature or at least 1 meter above the opening. That is for typical roofs, but should the roof be made of readily ignitable material, the outlet needs to stand at least 1.8 meter tall generally, but at least 600 millimeters above the ridge level for a distance up to 2.3 meters away from the ridge. Thatched roofs attract further consideration of temperature insulation between flue and the thatch. Connecting flue pipes are just that, connections of appliance with the chimney. Should be proper and not hidden within build-ups. The distance between them and combustible materials should be at least 3 times their diameter, and if they need to be closer, then the distance can be reduced to 1.5 times the diameter, given a non-combustible shield is installed to a distance at least 1.5 times the diameter in all directions. The document requires at least 12 mm air gap between the combustible material and the shield. The flue should be serviceable and have an accessible debris collection feature. Masonry chimneys should be at least 100 mm thick in general, but 200 mm between other properties or other fire compartment. Combustible material should be at least 200 mm away from the inside of the flue or the recess, or 40 mm from the face of a masonry, chimney or fireplace, unless it's a wall or floor finish like a skirting board or a mantelpiece. Metal fixings, however, can be as close as 50 mm to the inside of the flue liner. It is all about the heat dispersion through the material and what effect it may have on the combustible materials. The guidance also tells us that open fireplace should have gutters that lead smoke to the flue at an angle no less than 45 degrees, and that hearth should be of appropriate size and material, selection of which will depend on the heat dispersion of the appliance. For example, appliances that do not give away more than 100 degrees centigrade from below, it may be the hearth requirement may be as little as 12 mm thick tiling, but for structural hearth, we talk of a minimum starting at 125 millimeters. Diagrams contained in the document nicely convey all the geometrical constraints for all different types of appliances, from open fires to low heat output. It is important to monitor air quality in the room containing an appliance that burns fuel, and the way to do it is by a carbon monoxide alarm in line with BSEN 50291. Either battery or main power located 1 to 3 meters away from the appliance, on the ceiling 300 millimeters away from walls, or on the wall at least 150 millimeters away from the ceiling but over doors and windows openings. When the hearth and appliance is placed close to the wall within 50 millimeters, the wall needs to be thick at least 200 millimeters and be at least 1.2 meter above the hearth and at least 300 millimeters above the appliance. When the appliance is further away but not further than 300 millimeters, the thickness of the wall goes down to 75 millimeters. When the hearth detaches from the wall up to 150 millimeters, we need to provide minimum thickness of the wall of 75 millimeters, but further away there is no such requirement anymore. I do strongly suggest you guys have a look at the diagrams within the document. These are very, very good and clear. Now, Section 3 expands on the provisions of Section 1, considering gas burning appliances with a rated input of up to 70 kilowatt net. I could simply say, do not worry, just get an appropriately competent installer registered on a gas safety register, firm or a person involved, and let them do the magic, as undoubtedly that is what the approved document asks you to do when it comes to gas installations. The Gas Safety Installation and Use Regulations is the piece of legislation that further covers the subject. In general, appliances fitted in the room where people sleep or bathe should be of room-sealed type. There are numerous different gas appliances, including cookers, room heaters, decorative fuel effect fires, insert light fuel effect fires, and each will come with the requirement for air supply and or change of the air in the room when the products of the combustions are released into the room. The basic limits for the minimum provision of open air vents will depend on the type of appliance, whether open fluid or room sealed, freestanding or enclosed within a compartment within the room, and then the compartment being either ventilated through the room or to the outside air. Similarly, for the consideration of flueless gas appliances, there are limits given within the document going by the type of the appliance, its heat input, the volume of the room, and the free area of permanently open air vents. The size of flues follows similar consideration of Section 2, so the gas appliances imitating fireplaces, the flue diameter will start at 175 millimeters, and for radiant or convector gas fires at 125 millimeters. The height of the flue these days usually follows the manufacturer specifications. For older installation, we may need to go back to old standards, or we may need to calculate it. The location of the outlet for the combustion gases is not as stringent as the one for solid fuel burns. Nevertheless, we want to minimize the impact of a gas plume leaving our building. There is too many places where we can place the outlet on our building to tell you all here. They do take 2 pages of A4, one for the text and the other a diagram, so do check it out for further information. The distances are generally somewhere between 300 millimeters to 2 meters. For a roof in situation close to the boundary or the roof window, the penetration of the outlet should be at least 600 millimeters to the sides and top of the opening and 2 meters under. The guidance provides a warning that the locations of the condensing boiler outlets, even though fine under building regulations, may be of a nuisance to our neighbors under the Environmental Protection Act, and should be perhaps as far as directed in the we should search for the further guidance in the Guide to Condensing Boiler Installation Assessment Procedure for Dwellings. Naturally, the flue outlets need to be protected from blockages and tampering, properly selected and installed. The requirement for the provision of a carbon monoxide alarm follows from Section 2. Now off to Section 4, which deals with additional provisions for oil-burning appliances with a rated output up to 45 kilowatts. It considers appliances that burn kerosene and gas oil class C2 and D to BS 2869 or liquid biofuel to EN 14213 or blends of fuel. The provisions for location, ventilation and outlet location follows that for gas appliances, albeit ever so slightly differently, so do not assume that's the same. Go and check the tables and diagrams in the document. The Secretary of State in this approved document is concerned about the temperature of gases traveling within the flues. Most appliances should produce exhaust gases well below 100 degrees centigrade, but we are advised to check the manufacturer's literature, and in doubt or with a lack of information we should think of gas temperature in excess of 250 degrees. In line with the need, the chimney should be lined with material of appropriate designation. Similarly to other section, halves and provisions for gathering oil spills should be made as necessary as is the provision of carbon monoxide alarms. Section 5 deals with provisions for liquid fuel storage and supply. In the Gs, the oil and LPG units and their installation should be so located and constructed to avoid their damage, especially during a building fire or fire close to the boundary, and are labeled with information on how to deal with leaks. There are certain limits of the size of installation that this document covers, and these are different for the protection of the storage and different for environmental concerns, especially where the tank serves more than a dwelling. If in doubt, the fire authority can be consulted, and the Control of Pollution Oil Storage Regulation 2001 may need to be read. So the protection of oil tanks will consist of a solid concrete base to start with. Then we can either enclose it with a special fire hazard room, or if it is closer to the building than 1.8 meter, we should either make a building imperforate for fire for at least 30 minutes or provide a barrier. Either way, such constructed shield, freestanding or as a part of a building, should extend 300 mm beyond any side of the tank. If the tank is less than 760 mm from the boundary, we will need to construct a firewall of 30 minutes fire resistance. If the tank is at least 1.8 meter away from the building and at least 760 mm from the boundary, the concrete slab alone will do just fine. For the oil supply pipes, in these should be robust and fitted with fire valve system. For the control of pollution, secondary containment may be required where there are positions so there is a significant risk of oil pollution. This will be either by means of integrated or constructed bands. In any case, an information should be attached to the tank with instruction of what to do in case of leak and the telephone number to the environmental agency. The LPG storage tanks will be controlled by the Health and Safety Executive, but small installation of up to 1.1 ton can be done following the guidance of the approved document. We are referenced to UK LPG Code of Practice 1 Bulk LPG Storage at Fixed Installation Part 2 and BS 5482 besides this guidance. In simple terms, tanks should be in well-ventilated spaces away from sources of heat and buildings, and one firewall can be provided of 30 minutes fire rating or 60 minutes if it forms part of the building. If the tank is 3 meters away from the building or the boundary, no special considerations are required. But if it gets closer to any one of them, we are assisted with handy diagrams in approved document. LPG is heavier than air, so we need to make sure if the tank leaks, it does not leak into our basement cellars or drains. Smaller bottles of gas can be located close to the buildings, but there are as ever minimum distances required away from doors, windows, drains, etc. Pipes laid underground need to be corrosion proof, but the pipe entering the building should be above the ground, metal and sleeved. Any pipes run in shaft, ducts and voids should be ventilated. Now, all there is to do is to fulfill the checklist from Appendix A, follow procedures from Appendix E and give it to building control and the client. So this is it, folks, the approved document J, combustion appliances and fuel storage system. Let's sum it up section by section. Section 0 gives us the scope and standards for consideration. The approved documents primarily focus on domestic installations and cover combustion and fuel storage systems, including solid, gas and oil installations with specific output limits. In the text, we are further directed to seek guidance in CIBSE Guide B and materials from BSI and IGEM. Section 1 gives us general provisions for safe installation, which includes proper specification, material size, workmanship and inspection. Adequate air supply, ventilation and proper flue systems are essential for the good operation of the system. Specific requirements include carbon monoxide allowance for combustion appliances and correct half sizing, heat insulation and material selection. Proper documentation and compliance testings are mandatory. Section 2. As to the basics regarding solid fuel appliances up to 50 kilowatts output, which require appropriate air supply, flue size and flue height. Flue outlet positions and distances from combustible must be carefully considered. Clearances from walls and half specifications vary depending on appliance type and proximity to other combustible and non-combustible materials. Section 3 adds consideration for gas appliances up to 70 kilowatts net input must be installed by a gas safety registered professional. Room-sealed appliances are recommended for sleeping or bathing areas. Ventilation and flue requirements vary by appliance type. Considerations for outlet positioning and potential nuisance are made. Section 4 adds information on oil burning appliances up to 45 kilowatts output and follows similar guidelines to gas appliances but with specific provisions for oil types and blends. Considerations are made for flue gas temperatures and its acidity, as well as that for positioning and half materials. The document emphasizes checking of manufacturer specifications. Section 5. Oil storage and LPG storage must be protected from fire and environmental damage. Proper installation, secondary containment and labeling for emergency procedures are required. Fire-resistant barriers or walls might be necessary based on proximity to buildings and boundaries. Some guidance on underground and above-ground piping is provided. In the next episode, we will move to the approved document K, protection from falling, collision and impact. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that the considerations of the approved document J, combustion appliances and fuel storage systems, makes more sense to you right now. If you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. I'm more than happy to help you out. In Bitna, we deal with planning, designing and managing of your projects, and we are always glad to facilitate a free initial consultation to steer you in the right direction. Visit www.bitna.co.uk and reach out to us. Whether your question is if we can help you with your project or what should I do, we will be able to give you a piece of non-obligatory advice. At Bitna, we help our clients design and execute their dream homes or investments. If your building is falling apart, we can also help investigate the reasons behind it and to provide you with an appropriate strategy, design and specifications for the repair. Thank you again for listening. Please voice up your opinions. I'm waiting for you on LinkedIn, and I want to hear from you. See you next week. Bitna designs the world around you. Toodaloo.